So, The Guardian, which is obviously this major, highly respected publication, they just put out their power rankings for the 48 teams heading into the 2026 World Cup.
Right, the big list.
Yeah, the big list. And out of 48 teams, they rank South Korea 44th.
Wow. 44th.
The 44th. I mean, that has them sitting below almost everyone. It's predicting just an absolute unmitigated disaster for the Taegyeok Warriors.
It's a brutal assessment, yeah.
It really is. But then, and this is where it gets crazy, you pull up the supercomputer simulation run by Opta, the massive football statistics outlet.
Oh, yeah, the data guys.
Exactly. So after running like 10,000 structural simulations, that supercomputer gives South Korea a massive 70.35% chance of advancing out of their group.
Which is incredibly high.
Right. And it gets wilder because that probability of reaching the round of 16 is actually higher than tournament dark horses like Japan.
That is just a massive disconnect.
Exactly. So today, our whole mission for this deep dive is figuring out who is lying. Because you have human experts basically screaming that the sky is falling, while this cold, hard supercomputer is practically, booking their tickets for the knockout stage.
It's the absolute definition of analytical whiplash. You have qualitative human analysis looking at recent friendly results, locker room upheaval, and this massive last-minute tactical shift, and they are just slamming the panic button.
Yeah, they're looking at the chaos.
Exactly. Yeah. But the quantitative model, it doesn't care about narratives. It looks at the structural path, the actual tournament bracket, historical resilience metrics, and it just sees a remarkably clear route to success.
So our goal today is to kind of cut through all that noise. We're going to put the distractions aside and focus exclusively on the finalized 26-man South Korean 2026 World Cup squad.
Right. Just the players on the plane.
Just the guys on the plane. We're going to unpack the mechanics behind their world-class attacking strengths, pull apart their glaring, keep you up at night tactical vulnerabilities, and analyze the established superstars carrying the weight of a nation.
Plus the new kids, right?
Yeah, exactly. Scouting the fresh blood, looking to make a name for themselves. And we are drawing on a really compelling stack of sources to do this.
Yeah, we have a really comprehensive technical report breaking down their recent tactical evolution. Plus, we're pulling from historical data on their World Cup performances, highly detailed player scouting profiles, betting market odds, and even boots-on-the-ground news reports from their high-altitude training camp that's actually operating right now in Utah.
Which is fascinating in itself. So for you listening, whether you're a diehard soccer fan meticulously prepping your tournament brackets, or you're just someone who loves a dramatic high-stakes underdog story full of wild tactical gambles, this breakdown is going to make you the smartest person in the room when Group A finally kicks off. And I think to understand what this team's going to do on the pitch in Mexico, we really have to start with the controversy surrounding the tactical system itself.
Yeah, the elephant in the room.
Right. Because if you look at their Asian qualifying campaign, it was flawless. I mean, they were undefeated, 11 wins, 5 draws, 40 goals scored, and only 6 conceded.
Domination.
Complete domination. And throughout that entire 2-year run, head coach Hong Young-bo strictly used a traditional back four defense. It was stable, it clearly worked. But then, literally right before the tournament, they abruptly threw it all out and shifted to a 3-4-3 formation.
Right. Or a 3-4-2-1, depending on the phase of play. But the overarching point is that the defensive architecture was completely just uprooted.
Which is insane to do weeks before a World Cup.
It is. And to understand why a manager would risk introducing that level of instability right before a major tournament, we have to look at the institutional dynamics within the Korea Football Association, the KFA.
Right, because they've had a rough couple of years.
Oh, they've been enduring severe turbulence. I mean, they went through a massive, highly public ordeal with the appointment and then the subsequent firing of Jurgen Klinsmann.
Yeah, it was a mess.
Total mess. So when they brought Hong Young-bo back for his second stint as manager in July 2024, and we should remember, he also managed them during their disappointing 2014 World Cup campaign, the KFA board knew they desperately needed tactical modernization.
Right, because Hong is more of a man manager, isn't he?
Exactly. Hong commands immense respect in the locker room. He's a national icon. But the board felt they needed a European tactical mind to structure the actual game models.
So they basically bifurcate the managerial role. They bring in Hong to be the charismatic leader,
Yeah.
the guy who controls the dressing room culture, and frankly, handles the incredible pressure of the domestic media.
Yeah, he takes the heat.
But behind the scenes, they hire Portuguese assistant coach João Oroso. And Oroso is the one acting as the architect, drawing up the actual tactical frameworks on the whiteboard.
That is exactly the division of labor. Oroso and his European staff are designing the structural game plans. And this dynamic, it recently sparked a massive media storm.
Oh man, the deleted interview.
Yes. A highly publicized interview with Oroso was published, and then suddenly, mysteriously, just deleted from the internet.
Which always makes people want to read it more.
Of course. And in that deleted text, Oroso essentially admitted that they shifted to a back three, which, drops into a back five out of possession because, in his exact words, it is difficult to hold out only with four backs against strong World Cup teams.
Wow.
Yeah. He bluntly stated that while South Korea has some of the best individual attackers in the world, the overall defensive collective just cannot compare with top-tier European nations if they play them straight up in a back four.
He said the quiet part out loud. I mean, you simply do not hear a coaching staff admit just weeks before a tournament that their baseline defense isn't good enough to survive.
Never. It's a shocking moment of stark realism.
But if we strip away the PR disaster of the deleted article, tactically, it actually makes perfect sense. The shift to a 3-4-3 is a direct structural response to a perceived gap in quality.
It is. Let's break down exactly how this 3-4-3 operates mechanistically when they have possession, because it is designed entirely to unleash those world-class forwards that Oroso mentioned.
Okay, paint a picture for us.
So imagine the pitch. You have three central defenders. When South Korea has the ball, the outer two center backs split very wide.
Right, they stretch out.
Exactly. This geometric spread allows the two wing backs, the players on the extreme left and right flanks, to push incredibly high up the pitch. I mean, they almost operate as traditional wingers.
And the reason you push those wingbacks so high is to create maximum width, right?
Yeah.
You force the opponent's defensive line to stretch horizontally to try and cover them.
Yes. And once the opponent is stretched, you have created physical gaps in the center of the pitch.
And that is where the magic happens for South Korea, because those central gaps are where their inverted wingers, Son Heung-min and Lee Kang-in, are instructed to operate. Instead of being isolated out by the corner flags, they drift inside into what we call the half spaces.
Right, and let's define the half space for a moment for the listener, because it is arguably the most critical real estate in modern football.
Go for it.
If you divide the pitch vertically into 5 lanes, so you have the 2 wide lanes by the touchlines, the central lane running right down the middle of the goal, and then the 2 lanes wedged between the center and the flanks.
Right.
Those 2 in-between lanes are the half spaces. Operating in the half space is deadly because it forces defenders into a dilemma.
Because who marks them?
Exactly. A central defender doesn't want to get pulled out of the middle to mark a player there, and a fullback doesn't want to abandon the wide area. So Son and Lee receive the ball in these zones of confusion, facing the goal, closer to the penalty box, and they're ready to execute rapid vertical combinations.
Okay, so the offensive upside is brilliant. You manufacture a system that guarantees your 2 best players receive the ball in the most dangerous areas of the pitch, facing forward against a scrambled defense.
It's beautiful on paper.
Right, on paper. But I am looking at the data from their recent March friendlies, and this tactical shift looks like a massive overcorrection. I mean, they lost 0-4 to Ivory Coast and 0-1 to Austria.
Yeah, those tapes are grim.
The video of those matches is terrifying. Doesn't changing your defensive identity this late basically guarantee structural chaos when you lose the ball?
It guarantees highly exploitable transition moments, absolutely. And this is exactly why the human analysts at The Guardian are predicting failure.
Because of the transition.
Yeah. Think of this system like a heavily stretched rubber band. When South Korea is attacking, the wingbacks are pushed 50 yards up the pitch. The moment South Korea loses possession, that rubber band snaps.
But human beings aren't rubber bands. They can't snap back into defensive position instantly.
Right. The wingbacks are caught completely out of position, and this leaves massive, gaping physical spaces on the flanks behind them.
And when those wingbacks are caught upfield, the opponent's wingers immediately sprint into those empty spaces, which triggers this cascading structural collapse for South Korea.
It's a domino effect.
Exactly. Because the wide center backs are suddenly forced to sprint out toward the touchline to cover the advancing attackers.
Yeah.
But if your center back is running toward the sideline, He is abandoning the center of the penalty area.
Mechanistically, it creates a void exactly where you need bodies the most. In both the Ivory Coast and Austria friendlies, opponents exploited this ruthlessly.
I remember watching that. They just bypassed the midfield.
Entirely. They didn't try to pass through the middle of South Korea's team. They hit long diagonal passes into the spaces vacated by the wingbacks. Once the Korean center back slid over to cover, the opponent would drive to the end line and execute a cutback.
And just for clarity, a cutback being a pass dragged backward from the goal line, aiming for a trailing attacker arriving near the penalty spot.
Right. It is statistically the highest probability scoring action in football because it catches the goalkeeper and the recovering defenders moving in the wrong direction.
And if the center backs have been pulled wide, there is literally nobody occupying that central zone to intercept the cutback.
Exactly. This is the immense physical toll of the 3-4-3. The wingbacks are required to sprint the entire length of the pitch continuously.
It sounds exhausting.
It's grueling. They have to provide the attacking width in the final third and then execute 50-yard recovery sprints to form a 5-man backline out of possession. If their lungs burn out in the 70th minute, the system collapses completely.
Which perfectly explains this fascinating logistical choice the KFA made regarding their pre-tournament camp. Because to support this physiologically brutal system, they didn't hold their pre-camp in Korea or down at sea level in Mexico.
Well, they didn't.
They proactively set up a high-altitude pre-camp in Salt Lake City, Utah. They are utilizing the Zionsbank Training Center and the Brigham Young University campus. They are intentionally training at 1,300 meters above sea level.
The science behind this is crucial. When you train at high altitude, the reduced oxygen pressure forces the body to adapt by producing more red blood cells.
Right, which enhances oxygen delivered to the muscles.
Exactly. They're specifically preparing for the thin air of their group stage venues. They play their first 2 games in Guadalajara, which sits at over 1,500 meters of elevation, before they have to move to Monterrey.
They even arranged friendlies against Trinidad and Tobago, which they won 5-0, by the way, and El Salvador right there in Utah, purely to simulate the cardiovascular demands of playing this specific tactical system in thin air.
They're essentially trying to build a physiological safety net to catch the tactical flaws of Arroso's back three.
But an untested system, no matter how much altitude training you do, is ultimately only as good as the players attempting to execute it under pressure.
Very true.
So let's look at the vanguard. The established superstars forming the absolute spine of this team. We have to start with the captain, Son Heung-min.
The talisman. I mean, he is 34 years old now.
Hard to believe.
It really is. He has transitioned away from the grueling physical demands of the Premier League and is currently playing for LAFC in Major League Soccer.
Which is a big change.
It is. That club transition is a fascinating data point for his current physical profile. But for the national team, his status remains unchanged. He is the emotional, technical, and tactical heartbeat of the squad.
At 34, his explosive, raw sprint speed. The trait that terrified European defenses for a decade at Spurs has naturally diminished. But what I find fascinating about his evolution, particularly watching him in MLS, is how he has adapted his spatial awareness.
Oh, he's so smart off the ball now.
Exactly. He isn't trying to beat 3 men down the touchline anymore. He operates almost like a Raumdeuter, a space investigator. He drifts centrally. He finds the blind spots between defenders.
And this ties perfectly back into that 3-4-3 system we were just talking about.
Right.
If the wingbacks are handling the running and the width, Son is freed from those exhausting touchline duties. The system is structurally designed to mask his aging legs and amplify his unmatched, ambidextrous finishing inside the penalty box.
He can shoot with both feet.
His ability to finish with equal lethality on his left or right foot makes him a total nightmare to defend in tight spaces because you cannot force him onto a weaker side.
And the psychological weight he is carrying into this specific tournament is just astronomical. I mean, this is overwhelmingly likely his last dance on the World Cup stage.
It really feels like a finale.
And he is actively chasing monumental historical records. He currently sits on 54 international goals. He needs exactly 4 more goals to tie the legendary Cha Bum-kun's all-time national scoring record.
Which is huge in Korea.
Massive.
Meh.
Furthermore, he currently shares the record for the most World Cup goals by a South Korean player. He has 3, tying him with An Jong-hwan and Park Ji-sung.
Wow, so close.
A single goal in Mexico puts him alone at the top of that mountain. The narrative pressure to drag this tactically vulnerable team forward is immense. But If Sun is the spearhead trying to outscore the tactical flaws, who is acting as the shield?
That brings us to the most important structural player on the roster, without a doubt, Kim Min-jae,
The anchor.
the absolute anchor. At
Yeah.
29 years old, he's in his prime, playing for Bayern Munich, and we spent significant time discussing the terrifying transition vulnerabilities of this 3-4-3 system,
The
right?
gaping holes left behind the wingback.
Exactly, those U-shaped defensive structures. Well, the reality is that the entire viability of this formation hinges on Kim Min-jae's ability to single-handedly put out those fires.
I really want to paint a picture of what that looks like on the pitch for you listening. Because imagine South Korea loses the ball deep in the opponent's half, the wingbacks are caught out. An opposing forward receives a long pass and is suddenly sprinting into acres of open space on the flank.
It's a terrifying scenario.
It is. And Kim Min-jae, as the central or wide right center back in that back three, has to make a split-second geometric calculation. He has to sprint out to the flank to delay the attacker. But he cannot just dive into a tackle.
No, because if he misses, it's game over.
Right, if he misses, the attacker has a free path to the goal. He has to aggressively close the distance, adopt a side-on body posture to dictate the attacker's direction, and physically shepherd them away from the center of the pitch, essentially buying the 3 or 4 necessary seconds for his wingbacks to sprint back and recover.
And he has to do this while isolated, often in a one-on-one or even a one-on-two disadvantage.
It's incredible.
What makes Kim Min-jae elite, and quite frankly why he starts for a club like Bayern Munich, is his rare combination of massive physical size and elite recovery speed.
He's huge, but he's fast.
Yes, he possesses the aggressive anticipation to step high up the pitch and intercept passes before the counterattack even begins. But when that fails, he has the sheer pace to turn and run down attackers. If Kim Min-jae loses his individual duels, or if he suffers a tactical lapse in positioning, South Korea's defense shatters. The system requires him to be flawless.
So we have Sun operating in the half spaces up top, waiting to strike.
Yeah.
We have Kim Min-jae managing the chaos at the back. Who connects them? Because you cannot bypass the midfield in international football.
You definitely cannot. Enter Lee Kang-in.
The creative hub.
Exactly. He is 25 years old, operating in the prime of his physical capabilities, playing for Paris Saint-Germain. And he arrives at this national team camp carrying a massive psychological boost because he's fresh off winning back-to-back UEFA Champions League titles.
That's huge for team morale.
It's massive. He brings a winning pedigree and a big game temperament that is invaluable to a squad dealing with internal doubts about their tactics.
The reporting actually noted he literally arrived at the Utah altitude camp straight from the Champions League final in Hungary. Like he landed, had a quick lunch, and immediately went out to the training ground.
No rest for the wicked.
But tactically, what is his specific role in this machinery? If they are relying on these rapid vertical counterattacks to exploit the spaces Son Heung-min is finding, how does Lee Kang-in actually facilitate that?
So he provides elite ball retention under pressure and exceptional left-footed distribution. Mechanistically, when a team wins the ball back deep in their own half, the opponent immediately initiates a counterpress.
Right, they swarm the ball to win it back before the counterattack can start.
Exactly. Lee Kang-in is the pressure release valve. He possesses a really low center of gravity and phenomenal close quarters dribbling. When Kim Min-jae wins the ball, he immediately looks for Lee.
Just gets it to his feet.
Yes. Lee can receive the ball with his back to the opponent, roll his defender, and instantly change the tempo of the game. He transitions the team from a defensive scramble into a structured attack with a single, progressive, line-breaking pass designed to find Son in stride.
So he is the metronome. He decides whether the team pushes the ball vertically in 2 seconds or holds possession to let the wingbacks push up.
Precisely.
And supporting these 3 pillars, we really have to acknowledge the critical role players who do the unglamorous work. I mean, we have Hwang Hee-chan from Wolves, who provides a relentless, bullish pressing energy off the ball.
He never stops running.
Never. And crucially, Lee Jae-sung.
Lee Jae-sung. He is the glue of this squad. He is 33 years old, playing for Mainz in the Bundesliga, with over 100 international caps.
A true veteran.
Very much so. The technical report specifically labels him the unsung hero. In a midfield that can become incredibly stretched and defensively frail due to the demanding nature of the 3-4-3, Lee Jae-sung provides positional discipline.
Right, he does the dirty work.
All of it. He handles the hard tackling, the defensive tracking, and the tactical fouling necessary to stop counterattacks. He does the heavy lifting, so players like Lee Kang-in have the freedom to take creative risks.
Okay, so the veterans provide the baseline. We know what Sun, Kim, and the two Lees are going to do. But if you look at the history of the World Cup, tournaments are rarely won purely by the established stars whose scouting reports are universally known,
Yeah.
right?
No, you need surprises.
Exactly. Deep runs are fueled by breakout players. The wild cards who inject a completely different profile into the team, players the opponents haven't fully analyzed. And Han Youngbo has actually brought in some genuinely fascinating new blood. Let's look at Jens Kastrup.
Oh, Jens Kastrup is a historic inclusion and just a fascinating tactical puzzle. He's a 22-year-old midfielder playing for Borussia Mönchengladbach in the German Bundesliga.
And his background is really unique for this team, right?
Incredibly unique. He is the very first foreign-born, dual heritage player having a German father and a Korean mother to ever be named to a South Korean World Cup squad.
Which breaks a massive historical barrier for the KFA. I mean, for decades, South Korean national teams have been almost entirely homogenous, relying strictly on domestic development pipelines.
Right.
Kastrup actually played for Germany's youth national teams at various levels. He only switched his sporting allegiance to South Korea last year. But beyond the cultural milestone of him taking intense Korean language lessons just to communicate in the locker room, let's talk about what he actually does on a football pitch. Because the sources uniformly describe him with one word: a fighter.
And that is a profile South Korean midfields have historically lacked. They traditionally produce highly technical, agile, possession-oriented midfielders. Kastrup is completely different.
He's German-trained.
Exactly. Brought up in the highly physical, transition-heavy environment of German academy football, he is combative. He possesses a massive cardiovascular engine and isn't afraid to initiate extreme physical contact to win the ball.
In reading his recent interviews, he really emphasizes his ability to make powerful, progressive runs forward with the ball, but also his sheer stamina to repeatedly drop back into defensive duels.
He offers immense tactical flexibility.
Right, because he can operate as a traditional box-to-box midfielder, disrupting the opponent's rhythm in the center of the pitch. But crucially, considering the flaws we discussed earlier, he has the exact physical profile required to fill that highly demanding left wingback role in the 3-4-3.
He is Hung Youngbo's calculated risk, integrating a player who doesn't fluently speak the language into a complex tactical system weeks before a tournament could really disrupt chemistry.
A huge gamble.
It is. But the KFA clearly calculated that they desperately need his physical bite. Domestic midfield options have suffered severe injuries, and their traditional midfield anchor, Hwang In-beom, is recovering from a highly erratic and taxing season at Feyenoord.
So Kastrup is the physical answer to the bruising encounters they expect against European and African opposition.
Yes, he is a disruptor deployed specifically to fix those transition vulnerabilities.
I love the idea of throwing a gritty, German-trained disruptor into the mix, but if the team needs an offensive spark off the bench, who are they looking to?
That would be Bae Jun-ho.
Okay, tell us about him.
He is a 22-year-old playmaker operating for Stoke City in the English Championship.
Which is a tough league.
Oh, the Championship is a notoriously physical, relentless league, and thriving there requires a very specific resilience. But his standout technical attribute is his genuine two-footedness.
Let's explain why being perfectly two-footed is such a structural nightmare for defenders. Because usually a defender analyzes a winger and forces them onto their weak foot, right?
Right, you take away their best weapon.
Yeah, if you know a player's exclusively right-footed, you angle your body to block the center of the pitch and force them down the touchline, neutralizing their threat. But Bae Jun-ho can slalom around robust defenders and thread precise through balls with either foot.
Which makes him so unpredictable.
Exactly. If an opponent decides to double-team Lee Kang-in, Bae Jun-ho can enter the match, operate in those half spaces we talked about, and the defender has literally no idea which way he is going to turn.
Exactly. He alters the geometry of the attack because he can access passing angles that a one-footed player simply cannot reach without awkwardly shifting their body weight.
He's a great weapon to have on the bench. And alongside Bae, we have a player who addresses the defensive side of the ball, Lee Ki-hyuk.
Ah, Lee Ki-hyuk. He is a 25-year-old defender from Gangwon FC. And he was considered a major surprise inclusion when the final 26-man roster dropped.
I remember people being shocked by that.
Yeah, he wasn't a heavily hyped prospect, but he forced his way into the squad by proving himself definitively in that recent 5-0 friendly win over Trinidad and Tobago. He represents a very modern profile, the ball-playing defender.
This is a crucial concept to understand regarding the 3-4-3 formation. When you play with three center backs, you naturally have a numerical superiority in the first phase of building an attack.
3 versus usually 2 attackers pressing.
Right. But that advantage is completely useless if your center backs treat the ball like a grenade. Opponents will just set traps, pressing the defenders aggressively to force a panic clearance.
Which is where Lee Kai-hyuk comes in.
Yes, a ball-playing defender like Lee is comfortable receiving the ball under immense pressure. He has the technical composure to fake a pass, step forward out of the defensive line, dribble into the midfield, and initiate the attack himself, basically breaking the first line of the opponent's press.
It changes the entire dynamic of the buildup. Instead of Kim Min-jae just booming the ball upfield to nobody, Lee Ki-hyuk can calmly thread a pass into the feet of Lee Kang-in.
It's so much more controlled. Looking at how Hong Young-bo constructed this final group, I am really fascinated by his utilization of what he calls training partners.
Oh, this is a brilliant strategy.
It really is.
Yeah.
He didn't just bring the 26 players officially registered for the tournament. He brought along a group of very young prospects, like a goalkeeper named Yoon Ki-wook, who was literally born in 2006.
Makes you feel old, doesn't it?
It really does. But these kids are traveling with the team, eating with the team, training at altitude with the team, with absolutely zero expectation of playing.
It is an exceptional display of institutional foresight by the KFA. Coach Hong has explicitly stated that while achieving results in Mexico is paramount, the national team program cannot suffer a drop-off after Sun Heung-min's generation retires.
Right, they have to prepare the next wave.
Exactly. He wants these teenagers to be steeped in the culture. He wants them to watch exactly how Kim Min-jae structures his pre-match diet, how Lee Jae-sung watches film, and how to manage the sheer psychological terror of the World Cup media circus.
And this forward-thinking policy actually paid off in real time in the most dramatic way imaginable.
The Cho Lee-jae story.
Yes. One of these training partners was a 24-year-old defender named Cho Lee-jae. He was purely there to absorb the experience and act as a practice dummy for the forwards.
Just happy to be there.
Exactly. But during that friendly against Trinidad and Tobago, starting center back Cho Yoo-min suffered a sudden foot injury. He's ruled out. The KFA panics. But wait, Cho Lee-jae is already there. He's already acclimated to the altitude. He already knows the playbook.
Next man up.
Boom. He is dramatically promoted from practice squad to the official 26-man World Cup roster. He just bypassed years of climbing the ladder by simply being in the right place at the right time.
It perfectly illustrates the chaotic, fragile reality of tournament preparation. You can plan the tactical models, you can control the altitude of the training camp, but a single mistimed tackle in a meaningless friendly completely rewrites your depth chart.
It really does. You have to adapt instantly. Which brings us to the ultimate crucible. I mean, we have dissected the mechanics of their tactics, we know the veterans carrying the load, and we have scouted the wild cards. But none of that exists in a vacuum.
No, there's another team on the pitch.
Right. How does this specific South Korean profile match up against the three teams actively plotting to exploit them in Group A?
Let's step into the Group A gauntlet. This is where theory meets reality.
They're facing Czechia, Mexico, and South Africa. And the sequencing of these matches is incredibly important. Let's break it down game by game. Match 1 takes place on June 11th in Guadalajara against Czechia.
Analytically speaking, this is the make-or-break match of the entire group stage for South Korea.
Really? The very first one?
Yes. In various models, Czechia is currently ranked 12th. They're generally considered slightly below host nation Mexico in terms of pure group winner probability, but tactically, stylistically, they are an absolute nightmare matchup for a South Korean team trying to survive with an untested back three.
Let's explore exactly why that clash of styles is so problematic.
So Czechia is managed by Miroslav Kubek. His teams do not play intricate possession-based football. They play a highly direct, intensely physical, vertical game.
Very traditional.
Very. They are content to let the opponent hold the ball in midfield, and then they strike with ruthless efficiency. They rely heavily on generating set pieces, corners, and wide free kicks, and utilizing the world-class clinical finishing of their star striker, Patrick Schick.
Who plays for Bayer Leverkusen.
Right, at the very highest level.
So if we simulate this matchup on the pitch, we see a massive vulnerability. We know South Korea's 3-4-3 struggles immensely when defending wide areas in transition. If Czechia forces the ball out wide and just repeatedly pumps high crosses into the penalty box, they bypass South Korea's midfield entirely.
They create isolated physical duels in the air.
Precisely. And Patrick Schick is a towering, incredibly strong forward with elite aerial timing. If he isolates himself against the smaller, wide center backs in South Korea's system, avoiding Kim Min-jae, he will dominate those aerial duels.
It's a huge mismatch.
Furthermore, set pieces are purely structural. If South Korea's defensive organization is already chaotic, defending an in-swinging corner from Czechia is terrifying. Now, South Korea did manage to win their last meeting against Czechia, a 2-1 victory in a 2016 friendly, but a friendly lacks the suffocating pressure of a World Cup opener.
The stakes here cannot be overstated. If South Korea's wingbacks get pinned back by Czechia's physicality and they concede early from a set piece, they lose their structural integrity.
They have to chase the game.
Right. They will have to push forward, opening up those massive spaces behind them. If they lose this opening match, panic sets in immediately because they know exactly the horror show waiting for them in match 2.
Oh boy. Match 2 is the pivotal emotional and environmental challenge of the group. June 18th. They remain in Guadalajara, but this time they are facing the host nation, Mexico.
Yeah, that is not going to be fun. Mexico is currently ranked 15th in the world. But playing a host nation is an entirely different sport.
It really is. South Korea will be stepping onto a pitch surrounded by a fiercely hostile crowd of over 45,000 people screaming for their blood. Every tackle Mexico makes will be cheered like a goal. Every time a Korean player touches the ball, they will be subjected to deafening whistles.
It's an intimidating atmosphere.
And South Korea has a genuinely traumatic historical record against Mexico in the World Cup.
The historical baggage is significant. They suffered a crushing 3-1 defeat to Mexico in 1998 and a heartbreaking 2-1 loss in 2018.
Yeah, Mexico has their number.
They do. And Mexico thrives in these environments. They play a very balanced, highly aggressive system. They feature Edson Alvarez anchoring the midfield, breaking up opposing attacks with incredible ferocity, and Santiago Giménez operating as a potent focal point up top.
Let's look at that midfield battle for a second. If Edson Alvarez is tasked with man-marking or aggressively shadowing Lee Kang-in, he has the physicality and the engine to completely disrupt South Korea's creative hub.
And if Lee Kang-in gets shut down.
Right. If Lee cannot turn and face forward, Son Heung-min is starved of service.
And you have to compound that tactical battle with the environmental reality. We discussed the Utah training camp earlier. This match is exactly why it exists.
Because of the altitude.
Yes, Guadalajara is at altitude. Playing your second match in 8 days at 1,500 meters while constantly chasing a Mexican team that is entirely acclimatized and riding a wave of nationalistic adrenaline is physiologically brutal.
If South Korea drop points against Czechia, they're walking into a hornet's nest, absolutely desperate for a result, against a team that historically almost never falters in the group stage.
It is a pressure cooker that could shatter a fragile defensive system.
But let's assume they survive. Let's say Kim Min-jae plays the game of his life, Son sneaks a goal on a counterattack, and they escape Guadalajara with their hopes intact.
Okay, best case scenario.
Right. They travel down to Monterrey for match 3 on June 24th against South Africa, known as Bafana Bafana.
On paper, strictly looking at the FIFA rankings, South Africa is the weakest team in the group.
Which usually means it's a trap.
Exactly, because under the management of Hugo Broos, they are a highly disciplined, tactically rigid unit. They understand their limitations and play a very specific style designed to frustrate technically superior teams. They utilize a highly compact, low-block defense.
Let's mechanistically define the low block for you listening, because it is the absolute bane of attacking football. Imagine dividing the pitch into 3 horizontal zones. South Africa essentially concedes the first 2 zones entirely.
They don't even try to win the ball high up.
No. They retreat and park 10 men within 35 yards of their own goal. The physical space between their defensive line and their midfield line is compressed to maybe 5 or 8 yards. It creates a dense, impenetrable thicket of bodies around the penalty area.
And when you face a low block, there is no space behind the defense for your fast forwards to sprint into. Son Heung-min's pace is neutralized.
So what does the attacking team naturally do? They push more players forward to try and pry open the thicket. South Korea's wingbacks will push higher and higher. The center backs will step over the halfway line.
The U-shape again.
Right. The team adopts a U-shape, passing the ball fruitlessly from side to side in front of the South African wall, getting increasingly frustrated.
And that is exactly what South Africa wants, because the moment a frustrated Lee Kang-in forces a low percentage pass through the middle and it gets intercepted, the trap is sprung.
They counter.
South Africa transitions instantly. They bypass the midfield entirely and launch the ball into the massive empty acres of space left behind those overcommitted Korean wingbacks, utilizing the raw, explosive pace of their forward, Lyle Foster.
This is the textbook definition of a trap game. If South Korea survives the physical battering ram of Czechia and the hostile emotional crucible of Mexico, human nature dictates a subconscious relaxation.
Right, they take their foot off the gas.
They will look at South Africa and assume, we are technically superior, we should dominate possession, we've got this.
Right.
But if they lose their structural discipline and overcommit numbers forward, South Africa's counterattack will ruthlessly expose the exact vulnerability João Rosso tried to hide.
South Korea must remain incredibly disciplined, patiently probing the low block without exposing their own throat, which requires immense psychological maturity.
So we have carefully walked through the entire tactical and structural minefield facing this squad. Let's take a breath and synthesize this incredible journey.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. We started by exploring a team navigating severe institutional turbulence, a dynamic where a Portuguese assistant was brought in to overhaul the tactics, while a national icon tries to hold a locker room together. We deeply analyzed the mechanics of a risky late-stage shift to a 3-4-3 formation, a system that maximizes width to unleash their inverted wingers, but creates terrifying U-shaped defensive vulnerabilities during transition.
We examined the extreme reliance on the aging but continually evolving captain, Son Heung-min, as he chases historical records in his final World Cup. We broke down how the entire defensive architecture rests on the shoulders of Kim Min-jae's ability to cover massive spaces in isolation.
We highlighted the historic, paradigm-shifting inclusion of Jens Kastrop, a German-born dual heritage fighter brought in specifically to inject physical grit into the midfield. And finally, we mapped out the exhausting, high-altitude gauntlet of Group A. The aerial bombardment of Czechia, the hostile, oxygen-deprived environment of Mexico, and the psychological trap of South Africa's low-block counterattack.
Which brings us back inevitably to the absolute paradox we opened the show with.
Right.
The Guardian's human analysts looking at this chaotic, untested system and ranking them 44th, predicting total failure, versus the Opta supercomputer predicting a massive 70% chance of advancement.
We promised to figure out who is lying. How do we reconcile these two entirely opposing realities?
Well, the reconciliation lies in understanding how tournament math actually works.
Okay.
The supercomputer isn't predicting that South Korea will magically fix their defensive transitions and play flawless, beautiful football.
Hey.
It is calculating probabilities based on the structure of the tournament bracket itself.
What's about the path?
Exactly. Here is the mind-bending cliffhanger regarding their potential pathway. Let's assume the human analysis is largely right. Let's assume South Korea's defensive vulnerabilities prevent them from dominating the group and they drop points. But they survive just enough to finish second in Group A, presumably behind the host nation, Mexico.
Finishing second in a group with Mexico and Czechia is a highly realistic, even probable scenario. They don't have to be perfect, they just have to be better than two other teams.
Exactly. In the newly expanded 48-team format of this World Cup, the bracket structure dictates a very specific pathway. If South Korea finishes as the runner-up of Group A, they will automatically face the runner-up of Group B in the first knockout round, the round of 32.
Okay, let me look at Group B. Group B consists of Canada, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Qatar, and Switzerland.
Look at that list of teams. While none of them are pushovers and Switzerland has a strong tournament pedigree, none of them are traditional global juggernauts like France, Argentina, or Spain.
Right, there's no superpower in there.
Exactly. This is the crucial defining mathematical point. Regional rival Japan has significantly higher odds to win their respective group because they are a more stable team. But South Korea mathematically has a higher probability, exactly 33.52% of reaching the round of 16. Why? Because of this incredibly, almost miraculously fortunate bracket path.
That is wild. It changes the entire perspective. It is not just a calculation of how good your team is in a vacuum. It is a calculation of who you avoid playing.
It's all about the matchups.
If South Korea can just survive the chaos of their own making in the group stage, if Kim Min-jae can hold the line just long enough, their reward is a highly winnable coin flip match in the round of 32 against a team from Group B.
It is a fascinating collision of extreme tactical risk and pure structural luck. They don't need to be the best team in the tournament. They just need to ride the wave of their favorable pathway.
So we are left with the ultimate lingering question for you to mull over as we count down the days to kickoff in Guadalajara. You are watching a team attempting to fly a plane while they're still building the engine.
The great analogy.
They are playing a risky, physically brutal system they barely know. They were relying almost entirely on a few aging superstars and dealing with intense background drama. But they also possess world-class lethal attacking quality capable of scoring against anyone, and they are sitting on a golden, heavily mathematically favored bracket pathway.
So what happens?
Right. Will a chaotic tactical gamble, combined with sheer undeniable bracket luck, be the bizarre, unpredictable formula that finally propels Son Heung-min to glory in his final World Cup? Or will the supercomputer's printed ticket to the knockout rounds get shredded by the brutal reality of their defensive flaws?
I can't wait to find out.
It is going to be an absolutely unforgettable watch.